Hi, this is Katie with Hard Hats High Heels, flying solo this week with a few garden tips that I'd like to share for you before the season really hits us and the snow starts flying. But before I get there, I'd like to give thanks to our sponsors, Bankers Trust, KDC Built, Mimi & T Photography, and The Garden Grunt. If you'd like to learn more about our sponsors, check them out on our website, hardhatshighheels.com. Now the first two tips that I want to share with you, if you've got any trees or shrubs in the ground that are newly planted, maybe within the last 5 to 7 years, I take that back. If it's your trees, those are the real important ones that have been in the ground for maybe 5 to 7 years. Those you're going to want to give them a good drink of water. It's been kind of a dry season for us, particularly going into fall here. And if we don't get an inch of rain, I'd like to see you water in those maybe 20 to 30 minutes on a slow trickle a couple times before the frost really settles into the ground. The shrubs, if they're newer this year, go ahead and give them a good drink as well. It's not going to hurt anything. It just might help them survive the winter a little bit better or more comfortably if you can imagine that. So the second tip I have is why don't you make sure you leave your garden as is. I don't like people going out there and trimming back on their grasses, trimming back on their perennials, or any shrubs particularly that flower in the spring. If you're trimming those shrubs that flower in the spring, you're most likely trimming off the buds that you're going to see the blooms from. So shrubs like your forsythia, your lilacs, those are some big shrubs that a lot of people complain in the spring about not really pushing out blooms, and generally it's because they trim them in the fall. So just let everything sit. The nice thing about the grasses, and I'll show you here in a few seconds, is that they look good through the winter and they give you something for, I guess, some character in the garden. So it's not just some bland tundra of white snow. So keep that in mind as you're running through your garden. A few things you can do, if you want to put down a fresh layer of mulch, you can, particularly around some roses that are maybe a little more less tolerant of a cold winter. You can go ahead and do that. I would also recommend not trimming back your roses. The reason for that is, I know back in the day a lot of people used to trim their roses down in the fall, but with a lot of rabbits out there now, and if a winter's really hard, they're going to chew on those roses for you. So if you trimmed those roses in the fall, and then the rabbits came and ate them through the winter, you're going to end up with less rose than you could have started with. So I would just let them be, maybe feed the rabbits a little bit, it's okay. They need to get through the winter too. And do all your yard work in the spring. By then you're ready to do it and you're antsy because you've been cooped up. So I wanted to just share with you a few of my favorites from my garden. I was going to take you out into the garden, but it's kind of windy today. They're supposedly going to set out a frost this evening, so it'd just be best if we stay in here. I took some snapshots of them and I'll explain them further in the post here, but just to walk you through them, I've got some new favorites in my garden, and they're still blooming and showing some good fall color here. Oh, it's mid-October now, so you know, it's really nice to extend your season with the right kind of plants, so I wanted to share with you the secrets that I have. My favorite new perennial is the Roseanne geranium. It's been on the market maybe for 2 years now, and it's still blooming. It's a perennial geranium, so it's not something that you put in your container and be done with. Of course, you could put it in your container, but I really like it. This is the first year in our garden, so I think it's going to see more of a mounding effect next year. But again, I'm really excited because of the blooms. They're still going. They're very profuse on the perennial. And I think it's going to be one that I actually put in my front yard, actually take some other plants out. The second one that I'm really excited for in my garden is one that just joined within this last week. My husband planted a brandywine maple. It's a shade tree that only gets about 35 feet wide and probably about 40 foot tall. It's just off the deck here. It's going to add a little summer shade, but what I like about it is the great fall color, as you'll see in the photo. Number 3, with some great fall colors, the Twist and Shout hydrangea. It's a reblooming lace cap hydrangea, if you're familiar with the different varieties of hydrangea. It'll get a pink or a blue bloom during the season, depending on the acidity of the soil. But again, what you're seeing here is some nice fall color. It's kind of bland, similar to what a viburnum would turn in the fall, but that orangish, reddish color is real nice to see, something different. It does well in the shade, so you know that can bring some color there, whereas otherwise people think they can't bring some color to the shade. My next one, this is the flame grass, and I've got a picture here. It's kind of blowing in the wind, but it's more of a red foliage that it turns to in the fall. In the season, it's going to be green, obviously, and the plumes on them are kind of an ivory white. It doesn't get too tall, maybe about 3 foot wide. It's pretty similar to some of the grasses that you might see in some of the ditches in some areas of the state here, or country, if you will. But this one doesn't spread too much like those. It stays somewhat contained. I really like it. It's good, nice height for some privacy, and that's where we've got it in our garden. And the last one that I'm really, really happy with and continue to be happy with every year are the knockout roses I have in our garden. I have the doubles, the double reds, just a single reds. I have a yellow one. I think that's it for the knockouts. I have some other roses. But by far, those are the best roses I've ever come across. They're still blooming. They still have big buds on them. Those guys will bloom until a hard frost. So depending on how hard that frost is and how soon it comes in your area, you're going to get a really long season out of those. So those are my top 5. Again, just to recap, the Roseanne geranium, the Brandywine maple, twist and shout hydrangea, the flame grass, and the knockout roses. So I've got more information in this post about them if you want to check it out. And last little tip, I'm going to actually be putting some bulbs in the ground this year. They're not going to bloom till next spring, but understand if you want spring blooming bulbs, you need to put them in the ground in the fall. If you want fall blooming bulbs, you got to put them in the spring or summer. So looking forward to next week where we have Megan Bloom on the show. She's been on the show before. She comes from The Mansion. It's an interior design company here in Des Moines. They're right off of Ingersoll Avenue. But really looking excited to see what kind of trends she's seeing in the homes this year, and what she's looking forward to in designing. So I believe we're actually going to see her at the mansion, so you can get a sneak peek on the inside. I've never been, so I'm kind of excited. So tune in next week. It's going to be Thursday, 4 o'clock. It's going to be pre-recorded, but I'll have it up on the website by then. So again, I want to thank our sponsors, Bankers Trust, KDC Built, Mimi and T Photography, and The Garden Grunt. Check out our sponsors on our website, Hard Hats, High Heels, and we'll see you next week.